It's very exciting and represents a really big step and the growth of Iraq Veterans Against the War. To be here today and to be having this event, having this conference, and having over 200 of our members attending, and about 55 of them actually testifying to their personal experiences in the occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan this weekend. It's a very important moment, and I think everyone should be very proud of themselves. To briefly introduce myself, my name is Kelly Dougherty. I'm the Executive Director and a co-founder of Iraq Veterans Against the War. I served for 8 years in the Colorado Army National Guard as both a medic and military police, and did 2 overseas tours, one in the Balkans and one in Iraq from 2003 to 2004. I'm one of the co-founders of Iraq Veterans Against the War, and I can say that it's a big change from less than 4 years ago standing on a stage in Boston with 5 other veterans to today being in a room where, you know, there's just dozens of us already here and many more on their way, and our organization has grown to over 800 members all across the country, all across the world, serving in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Germany, and more and more active duty members joining every day. Thanks. And the reason why I became involved in this movement to end the occupation was because of my firsthand experience in the military and in Iraq, and seeing the destruction of the country of Iraq and the damage it was causing to the people there, and also what it was doing to the military and to the men and women that I was serving with. And, you know, I felt there was a responsibility that I had to try to do something to help change the situation and help end the occupation. And all of us who've come to Iraq Veterans Against the War, it's been because of something very personal. It's been because we've been transformed in our own lives and feel like we have a responsibility to continue fighting, whether or not we're in the military, to uphold values that we took very seriously when we enlisted or that came to be very important to us through our service. We were formed in 2004. It's 2008. The war is going into its 6th year, and while it may get down at times, you know, I think that everyone should be proud that we're standing up, we're moving forward. Iraq Veterans Against the War is going to be a force that ends the occupation of Iraq. We are committed to 3 goals: immediate withdrawal of all occupying forces from Iraq, full benefits and health care for returning veterans, and reparations and compensation for the people of Iraq. Winter Soldier Iraq and Afghanistan represents our largest event to date, and we've organized this event because we believe that as we enter the 6th year of this occupation, the voices of veterans and service members, as well as civilians on the ground, need to be heard by the American people and by the people of the world, and also by other people in the military and other veterans, so they can find their voice to tell their story, because each of our individual stories is crucially important and needs to be heard if people are to understand the reality and the true human cost of war and occupation. Winter soldiers, according to Thomas Paine, are those Americans who stand up for the soul of their nation in its darkest times. And we're carrying on a legacy of hundreds of years of veterans and soldiers speaking out and resisting against policies that are unjust and that damage the military and damage humanity. And this is just one in hundreds of years of veterans raising their voices and being empowered. And I would just like to really acknowledge the fact that because of the live broadcast and because this is being on our website the entire time, people, including veterans and people in the active duty military, are able to join us and participate in this no matter where they are. And I think that's very important, and we're so thankful to be able to bring this outside of these walls and bring this all over the world. Now, I'm going to go ahead and segue into this opening panel. It's the Winter Soldier and the Legacy of GI Resistance. And we're going to hear from people who've been involved in organizing GIs and veterans to tell their stories and to take a stance and stand up for what is right for dozens of years, and show really what part of legacy is just in our generation and the generation that came before us. And it's going to be a great introduction to Winter Soldier, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And just to let everybody know, at the end, when people are finished speaking, we're going to be taking questions in the form of speaker slips, and people will be passing out speaker slips for questions to be written on, and I will read those from the front, and then our panelists will have the opportunity to answer. And very briefly, I'm going to introduce who's going to be speaking, and then I'll give a little bit further introductions of them right before they begin speaking. So first, we will hear from Gerald Nicosia, who's here on the end, and he is going to be reading a statement by Ron Kovic. Ron Kovic was a Vietnam veteran who was paralyzed in Vietnam and wrote Born on the 4th of July. And Gerald Nicosia is a historian and author who wrote Home to War, A History of the Vietnam Veterans Movement. Next, we'll hear from David Courtwright on my left. David is a professor who teaches at the University of Notre Dame, and he's the author of Soldiers in Revolt, which is the definitive history of the Vietnam-era GI movement. Next, we'll hear from Barry Romo. He's been involved as an organizer in Vietnam Veterans Against the War since 1971. He was a chair and also a testifier at Vietnam Veterans Against the War's Winter Soldier event in 1971 and continues to fight for GI rights and veterans' rights. And then we'll hear from Todd Ensign. He is an attorney and director of Citizen Soldier, which is a GI and veterans' rights and advocacy group based in New York, and has been doing this work for the past 30 years. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Gerald Nicosia, who will be reading a statement from Ron Kovic, who could not join us today. Thank you.